Hi folks, I'm Robin Johson. I'm the chap that 10 more years or so ago came up with the phrase a psychologically informed environment, a PIE, came up with the idea that what we have is psychologically informed environments. And I'm wanting to make this video at this point in time as my particular contribution to the upcoming and ongoing discussions about how to find a more service user friendly language in services, and particularly in services that want to operate as PIEs. I'm making the video at this point in time because there's been something bubbling up that I know particularly about and most people don't, which has been worrying me and exciting me in roughly equal measure. And the only thing you can do in that situation, I think, is to share it with other people and say, what do you make of this? Am I worrying too much, or is this fine, or is this never going to happen in the first place? Why worry about it? But I am making it in video form because what I want to show you is essentially video. It's essentially visual. It's all on screen. It's computer stuff, website, software stuff. So let's go straight to what I'm talking about. How many years ago? 5-6 years or so ago, I developed a website to describe and to explain all the stuff that I'm kind of interested in and looking at in developing psychologically informed environments. A string of examples, discussions, forum debates, and cartoons even. I love the cartoons. I'd love to have more of them. But let's go straight to this new piece of software that's really just come out at the beginning of May 2021, after years, 3 or 4 years of developing it, trying to get it right. And what I want to talk over is the potential for using this software, the potential role for this software in really seriously enhancing service user involvement in the development and the future planning of services. I'm looking particularly at homelessness services, but it isn't just about homelessness. There's a whole range of drug and alcohol services, complex needs services generally. And the big thing really that's happened in the 10 years or so since I first got started on this is the issue of co-production, of service user engagement and involvement, not just in being consulted, but actually in actively involved in developing, co-producing services. It's been a huge shift in that time and really, really exciting. And what I want to do is to make sure that this PIE software is part of that, contributes to that, rather than just going off in a different direction that is difficult to fit in with it all. So let's go straight to the page on the PIE link, which is where I've been putting stuff about the PIE Abacus. That's the name of it, the PIE Abacus. And it looks like this. So let's go into this in a bit more detail. This is the PIE Abacus used in an example of a service that's assessing itself according to the main themes that we teased out, spelled out as to what makes for a psychologically informed environment. Psychological awareness, training and support for the staff, an approach, an attitude of learning and inquiry when new things happen and you need to sort of work out what to do. Close attention to the day-to-day management of the service in what we call the 3 R's, the rules and the roles and the responsiveness of the service. And then something kind of broader and less clearly penned down, which we've called the spaces of opportunity, which is really about how you manage the building, how you manage the environment, how you work with the local area, how you work with the local services. So much more outward looking, and how people move through the service and how that can create opportunities and openings for people. So we call it the spaces of opportunity, which is a bit of an odd phrase, but seems to be the best we could come up with, to be honest. So this is a team that's kind of assessing where it is in terms of how it's making progress. Some people, I think very few people really score poor, and most people are actually doing better than they realise, and they're a bit intimidated by this idea that there's some big thing they're supposed to be doing. Most people, when they actually come across the PIE idea, go, oh, well, we were doing some of that already. Well, yes, you were. what we were trying to do with the whole PIE idea was just to sum up what works best, not to say stop what you're doing and do this instead. That was never the approach. It's certainly not the philosophy behind it. It's much more about appreciating what people can do rather than telling them what they should do. So what we have, though, is different degrees of progress by which people can say, how far are we just at the beginning? Do we really need to do a lot of work in this? And you can see that you can score each of your different aspects of the service, from the awareness and the training and so on, differently. So you can focus on the bit that you think you're strongest on, but also pick out the bit you're weakest on, because that's what you want to work on. And it's all about the team themselves coming up to that view of where they're at and what they want to work on. You then get a few subsidiary screens that say, well, why do you say that? What exactly, give us examples of what you're talking about, so we can sort of see whether or not people are being over harsh or picky or bigging up something that actually isn't that big a deal. Then, okay, so what helps and what hinders you? What have you got going for you? What stops you? What's holding you back? Not necessarily what's holding you back within the service itself. It could be things outside the service what you need to address. Particularly the space of opportunity, the barriers with other people. Sometimes the rules and roles are determined by head office, who haven't really talked to the staff on the ground about what's working for them. And there's all kinds of procedural things that sometimes are more or less uncomfortable. Sometimes it's local commissioners who wanted you to bid for a particular service, and actually you've got to do something more or different from that. How much freedom have you got to actually really work with with the person in front of you? And that's the kind of responsiveness of the service. So these are the issues that we can see right up as far as services that are, quite advanced in some aspects, although they can be still quite held back in some others. So it's not a kind of, you want to try and score well. This is really about identifying what you need to do, action planning. Some stuff you can do for yourself, some you really need to talk to others, head office, local commissioners, local other services that you want to work with more closely, that kind of stuff. So, all well and good. This is the thing seen from the point of view of the staff. You can actually put a number of different teams together in a large organisation, so you can get a sense of the whole service. That's one of the things that the software is brilliant at, really allows us to do. But it's the point of view of the staff. So what we want to look at now is, if we're in an era of co-production, can you get service user involvement in all of this? Well, the simple answer is yes, it's absolutely straightforward. Any team that's writing up their own views gets one member of the team, we call them the scribe, to sum it all up, type it into the keyboard, put it into the software on their behalf. So there's absolutely no reason whatsoever why you can't do exactly the same with a service user group. In fact, you could have service user groups all over the country, then pooling their assessments, so the agency, the top brass at head office, really get this they're getting this message from everywhere. That's quite convincing. That's quite powerful stuff. You can see why I think it's quite exciting. But the language here, psychological awareness, learning and inquiry, is this really the best way to phrase things in such a way that service users who know what they want to get out of the service, and it isn't necessarily going to be described in that kind of way? Do we need, in other words, a service user language, not just within services, but a service user language for a PIE's self-assessment? Pardon me. And if we did, what would it look like? What would it need to look like? Well, two things. Firstly, if you're going to compare the service user view with the staff view, they want to look similar enough so you can compare them. You don't want a completely different set of issues coming up. Though actually, down the bottom here, you see there's any other considerations. You can write in other considerations. You can write in things that are of particular interest in your service or your client group or your particular geographical patch. So there is the freedom to do that, so long as you don't mess with the original framework, because if you do that, you can't really compare them any longer. Why would you want to compare them? Well, for starters, if you wanted to compare views across the whole of the country with a large organisation, it's no good if they're all giving completely different versions about what matters. Then may need to some extent, so you can use the other considerations bit to do that. It gets even more interesting when you're looking at all the services in one particular locality, not just for the same agency, but a whole string of different agencies, talking about log jams, bottlenecks, gaps in the service in that local area. You can really see how this could be quite a powerful local voice for service users in local planning and local commissioning. And part of the beauty of it, you sit there in a room wherever you're scribe, you don't have to stand up at a big public meeting and give your views on behalf of everybody else. That's quite, not many people can do that. You know, it's quite challenging, quite threatening. And of course, in some community groups like Women Escaping Domestic Violence, you wouldn't want to stand up in public. The beauty of the software is that you can access it from wherever you are, wherever your group of people is having a conversation. It could be a coffee bar, it could be a bench in the park. You can talk with them wherever makes you feel natural and comfortable to come up with your own experience, your own ideas, your own thoughts about what you'd like the services here to be doing, to be working on next, to meet what you need them to do. Exciting possibilities, but do we need to get this language right? We can just rely on the scribe to say, oh well, what you're talking about here in the PIE framework would be described as an example of A, B, C, and D. So they do the sort of translating for you. We could actually edit and adjust the software itself. So you could come up with a whole string of different ways of describing the service. Psychological awareness is about understanding people, wanting to understand. So you could say, is this service good at understanding people, or are they good at treating me as a whole person? When it's training and support, that's kind of, well, do they know what they're doing? Do they seem to know what they're doing? Do they have the skills? Do they have the knowledge and the contacts to help me with the issues that I need help with? Or can they even just refer me on? Because that is, after all, one of the issues in the opportunities bit. Support might be a bit trickier. Can you really tell much about how supported the staff feel? Well, to be honest, I think you probably can. You can tell if someone's having a bad day. You can tell if someone's happy and feels kind of motivated and fulfilled in their work, or they just seem sort of jaded and bored. It's not an exact match for the staff's experience, but in some ways it's just as relevant. So we can see all the ways in which we can translate things differently. The rules and roles, well, the rules of an organisation is pretty much sort of ordinary language anyway, but it's kind of, is this service running well? Do you get to see the managers? Do they kind of, and that's one of the roles. Do you know who to turn to if you've got a particular problem? Do you have a key worker? Do they have advice sessions from another agency coming in? Is there a role that you yourself can take? Is there a sort of peer support, or is there a users committee, or are there ways in which you can yourself get involved and contribute? It could be just laying the tables at lunchtime, it could be digging the garden. There are all kinds of ways in which people can contribute that aren't necessarily in the organisational structure. So informal roles are just as important. So we can then move on through the spaces and so on and so on. At each stage we can come up with phrases that talk about it from the point of view of the service user, the customer, the client, the member of the community, whatever word you want to use. So one thing is we could change the whole structure, keep the basic themes, but just word them differently, and then you can put the staff view and the user view side by side, and you can more or less read between the lines. You can tell what they're talking about is the same thing, and if there's big differences, then that's important information. Alternatively, we could write a guide that goes into more detail, that says, this is the language that the staff use, this is the language you might find easier. Let's look at some examples of what, so you can flesh it out, you can tease out what the issues are. In other words, it could be pretty simple. We just say, look, let's try using this and see how it works, and then we can always modify it later. Or we could say, no, we really do need to do a bit more work on this before we can really take it out and present it as, hey guys, we'd like you to get involved in giving your views on stuff. You know, maybe we're just not ready there yet. Maybe we are. Maybe we tried different things in different areas, or with different kinds of services. An outreach service is going to be completely different from a treatment service where people have already been through all kinds of processing and they're definitely members of the community. Outreach, you're not even sure that you want to be involved with this bunch of people at all. So there's lots of ways in which we might want to modify and develop. My worry about it is that I don't feel that I'm the right person to be doing all this summing up on behalf of other people. I think I can facilitate and I can encourage and I can share with you this, I think, really quite exciting opportunity, but I can't be the person who then does it all. It needs to be some kind of group effect, and I don't quite know how to do that other than to say, this is where we're at the moment, this is what I bring, this is my contribution. It is a bit different from a lot of the other discussions about the language we use within services, but I hope you can see why this has been, like I said, why this has been worrying me and exciting me in roughly equal measure. And at this point, let's throw it open to a wider discussion, because that's, I think, the only way forward. Okay, folks, over to you.